Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I am glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theorycraft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. The concept for today's video is a challenge build that comes from Adam M. Adam sent in a challenge to see if we could get all damage types, or at least all elemental damage types, plus some weapon damage, stacked onto a single hit. This is the build he has so far. And today we're going to take a quick look and see exactly how we can go about for us to rein in the build a little bit, get it online quicker, and still be able to accomplish what it sets out to do. Now, because this is a challenge build, I am going to structure this video a little bit differently than some of our other ones. Instead of trying to make one specific build that is based around like a theme, concept, or optimizing around a specific feature, we're just trying to accomplish the parameters set out by the challenge. So because of that, we're not going in depth to the actual build itself. I'm just going to do two builds, one for 2014 rules and one for 2024 rules. Each build will go level by level as to how we could pick up as many of these damage types as possible, and once we have more or less met those requirements, then the rest of the build will be totally up to you. Personally, I think that we'll be approaching this as more of a thought experiment rather than as an actual full build that you would want to break out at the table, given that it doesn't really facilitate itself well for a full campaign, though you absolutely could play through a campaign with this type of thing in mind. But really, I do see it being as something fun for a lighthearted one-shot to try and break out and see if you can achieve every single damage type, or at least as many as possible, in a single hit. With all that said, we got two quick builds to go over, so let's jump right into them. So for revamping this build with 2014 rules, first off, let me quickly say that we should be able to pull this off by at least 10th or maybe 11th level, and to actually get every single damage type stacked up onto that hit, we're only going to have about 3 to 4 turns of setup in combat before getting our big strike off. Now, of course, 3 to 4 setup turns sounds like a lot, and yes it is, but again, this is more thought experiment than actual optimal play. Keep that in mind when we pick up the features that we do. Starting off with our origin, for our species, we want to be an Aasimar for their ability to have their angelic transformation and be able to deal out radiant damage on their attacks for a full minute. For our background, we want to be a Giant's Foundling from Big B's Glory of Giants in order to pick up the Strike of the Giants feature. The Strike of the Giants can give us a lot of different elemental types, but we are specifically going to pick up lightning damage. For our first level, we are going to be a Warlock, and since we are a 2014 Warlock, we get our subclass right away. With Warlock, we are going to be able to pick up either Green Flame Blade or Booming Blade as a cantrip, and then we can take the Genie Warlock, picking either the Djinn or Afriti as our Genie patron in order to get fire or thunder damage in either combination. From here, we're going to continue up into Warlock until we hit level 4. At level 4, we gain our first ability score improvement or feat, and for that, we are taking Gift of the Chromatic Dragon. That is reflective of the basic dragon breath weapons, and this is going to be the way that we pick up acid damage on our attacks. With one more level into Warlock, we can grab the Eldritch Invocation, Eldritch Smite, as well as the spell Spirit Shroud, which allows us to deal force damage with Eldritch Smite and cold damage with Spirit Shroud, although Spirit Shroud is another turn of setup. Now, before we continue on, there is one last thing to mention from Warlock. There is another 5th level Eldritch Invocation we could pick up, and that is Cloak of Flies. Cloak of Flies allows us to deal poison damage to any enemy within 5 feet of us at the start of their turn. And this is important. If we are dead set on dealing as many damage types as possible on a hit, and not just in a round per se, then we are not going to want that invocation, and we're going to want to pick up the Poisoner feat, which I will talk about in a little bit. If we are okay with counting that aura poison damage as delayed damage, but the fact that it's still happening in the same round and it's because of us, we can count it as part of the challenge, and we will pick up Cloak of Flies because it will save us having to get that extra level in order to get that extra feat, and allows us to deal all damage types a little bit quicker. The other nice thing about Cloak of Flies is that it is a bonus action to activate, but it lasts until we are incapacitated or we choose to end it. So it is one setup turn that we can actually get out of the way before some sort of combat would begin. In the meantime, once we hit level 6 and going onwards, we're going to go up 3 levels into Ranger. Now we will have needed to be very mad. We need at least a Charisma of 13, we need at least a Wisdom of 13, and we would need a Dexterity of at least 13. We can get the stats we need to multi-class however we want, it's just that our stats are going to be really bad. Again, completely theoretical challenge build. With all that said, we want to pick up 3 levels of Ranger in order to get Fey Wanderer Ranger, in order to get Dreadful Strikes. This allows us to deal psychic damage on top of our weapon attacks as well. From Ranger 3, we will go up to Ranger 4 if we need to get the Poisoner feat, but if Cloak of Flies was enough, then we can just jump right into our next multi-class. And yes, we are going to have to jump into a 3rd class if we want to get this build up and running as quick as possible. But if you were okay delaying it, technically we already have a good synergy. We only need necrotic damage right now, and that necrotic damage can come from the Life Drinker invocation that Warlock gets. You just have to be a 12th level Warlock to achieve it. That means waiting a really long time to pick it up. However, if we want necrotic damage on our strikes as quick as possible, then we're going to go Druid. And for 2 levels in Druid, we can pick up Circle of Spores, just like in the original build. And when we do our transformation, we add necrotic damage onto all of our melee weapon attacks. This one is what I would consider our most dangerous prep ability, given that it's an action to use and it only lasts as long as we have the temporary hit points. On our last setup turn, where we want to attack next turn, we are going to use our action to do the Circle of Spores transformation, hopefully not get hit, and then the turn after, make our attack, possibly using our bonus action to apply poison from the Poisoner feat onto our weapon first, hit the enemy, and dish out as many damage types as possible with all these various effects going. Well, that was the 2014 version, and that was with us dedicating to pick up as many different damage types as possible, and we got pretty much all of them. We're only going to really ever be able to get one weapon type of damage. For example, we could have gone Swarm Keeper instead of Fey Wanderer, but then we'd be trading psychic damage for piercing damage. And similar with the Genie, we could have gone Dow Genie for bludgeoning instead of Afriti or Jinn for fire or thunder. That build is dedicated a lot more to just speed running those damage types, so we are missing out on things like heavy armor proficiency. We will be stuck with, at best, medium armor throughout that entire build, and you're only going to get high-level spell slots or other various support abilities, depending on what class you focus into after picking up all the damage types. If we need the Poisoner feat, then we would need Ranger 4, as well as Druid 2, and of course those 5 levels in Warlock, putting us at total level 11, meaning we have 9 other levels to dump into either Druid or Warlock if you want a bit more spell casting. If you want a bit more martial capability, or just more hit points in general, we do have Ranger to bring that up. If you didn't take the Poisoner feat and you just took Cloak of Flies, then we have an extra level to play with, but the same methodology applies. All the other bonuses that are not related to damage types can be whatever you pick. Going on to the 2024 version, I will say this build is actually a lot easier to pull off, and really in general. You're actually going to be able to pull off the build by level 8, if not maybe even level 6. But the difference is that we're going to require a couple more turns of setup, and that we are actually losing out on our weapons damage type. The reason for that is because there are so many new features in 2024 that let you just swap out your weapons damage for a totally different damage type. With that said, let's jump into this 2024 build. Honestly, our origin is still the exact same. We're just going to assume that our stats can be distributed as we need them, even if they might suck. However, for our species as well as our background, we're picking the exact same thing. We're going Aasimar, and for our background, we're picking Giant's Foundling. This way, we can take Strike of the Giants as our origin feat, and we can have necrotic damage this time, so we will choose to reflect a fallen Aasimar and have the necrotic shroud ability rather than a radiant damage based ability. And both there at level 1 we get necrotic and lightning damage right off the bat. We're also going to get radiant damage by starting as a paladin. By starting as a paladin, we are able to not only pick up Divine Favor, which no longer has concentration and can give us radiant damage on all of our weapon attacks, but we're also going to get that heavy armor proficiency that would have been a nice bonus in 2014 rules. After that level in Paladin, we're going to jump over to level 2 as a Warlock again. This shouldn't really be too much of a surprise, as Pact of the Blade now allows us to swap our weapon's damage type for necrotic, radiant, or psychic damage, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Our actual weapon is now mainly just dealing psychic damage completely passively. Also, as a Warlock, we are going to again pick up the cantrip Booming Blade, though you could also pick up Green Flame Blade still. And keep in mind that since we are grabbing these through backwards compatibility as Warlock spells, you can feel free to apply Agonizing Blast to them, given that when we want to deal every single damage type to an enemy, we're using cantrips, not just making a regular attack. But with Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade, and then some Agonizing Blast at Warlock 2, we can then jump up to Warlock 3, once again pick up a Warlock subclass, which is of course Genie Warlock, same as our 2014 version, and we can pick Jinn or Afridi once more to gain either fire or thunder damage on those attacks. At Warlock 4, or our total level of 5, we are now going to get our first feat, and once again we are dedicating it to Gift of the Chromatic Dragon in order to pick up that acid damage. Acid is, as far as I can tell, the most difficult damage type to actually apply to a weapon outside of this feat. At level 5 Warlock, or level 6 total, we now gain everything else that we got from being a 5th level Warlock in 2014. Eldritch Smite, Spirit Shroud as well through backwards compatibility in order to deal that cold damage and that force damage. And once again, I bring up the argument between either Cloak of Flies as delayed poison damage, or the necessity for the Poisoner feat in order to grab poison damage on your actual attack. If you're okay with keeping Cloak of Flies up and just having it be delayed damage in from the full round, then we're done here at level 6. We have the ability to deal every single damage type in a single round. If you aren't satisfied with that, then we have to go up to Warlock 8, or total level 9 actually. I kind of lied before. But with total level 9, we would be a Warlock 8, we would grab our second feat, and that would be dedicated to the Poisoner feat. After total level 9, that's it. We've gotten everything we want just from a 1 level dip into Paladin, and the rest going up base Warlock. We have every single elemental damage type, we just don't have weapon damage types. But if you wanted some of them, you now could start to jump over to Ranger if you had the stats for it, multi-class into Swarmkeeper, and gain piercing damage, for example. I think we already synergize well enough between the two classes we have. We probably just continue with those and become a relatively competent character. You could have higher level spells by just continuing up Warlock and sticking with only 1 level in Paladin. But if you wanted better defenses, like an aura as like an actual team support ability, then you could continue up Paladin instead. We really have a lot more mold to play with on the 2024 build than the 2014 build. That's the entire build for both 2014 and 2024. In both versions, we get acid, cold, fire, poison, lightning, thunder, radiant, necrotic, psychic, and force damage. If we did actually feel like trying to pull off this challenge character at the table consistently in like a campaign setting, we're probably going to have a little bit more fun with the 2024 version than the 2014 version. The 2014 version just has a lot of what we would want in separate areas, whereas 2024 kind of compacts it all into one specific spot. Regardless of whether or not you were actually going to want to play this character or how you would approach it, I hope you found the challenge nature of this build at least a little bit interesting. It is a lot more of an actual theory craft or thought experiment rather than just a flavored build, but I did have a lot of fun going through and trying to find each and every little damage type that we could possibly get and tack it onto the build in as efficient of a way as possible. Let me know what you thought of the challenge build, how you would approach it if there is something I missed that would actually allow us to complete the challenge even sooner than the levels that we got to. And let me know if you like these types of challenge builds, the ones that are more pure theory crafting, could it be possible, Mythbusters style. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.